Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Caesar Stone, I'm pleased to welcome the next panel discussion. This panel is on airtight energy code solutions for single-family and multifamily homes. Our moderator today is going to be Phil Crone, Executive Officer of the Dallas Builders Association. We're also going to have Ed Dryden, Building Official for the City of Dallas, Montez from Love Engineering, James Rodriguez from Fox Energy Specialists, and Sam Shallenberger from Morrison Supply. This seminar will explore the trade-offs obtained for North Texas through the Council of Government and Energy Systems Laboratory and discuss best practices and important considerations for all builders and general contractors when it comes to complying with the newly adopted 2015 energy codes. Please join me in welcoming our panel.
All right, how's everybody doing out there? Good? Okay, I hope you had a lot of coffee because we're about to talk energy codes, and I know how much fun that can be. I know they only have a water station, but I did see some sugar, so we're going to be okay. Kind of improvising a little bit. The AV is not quite working, but the good thing is, came as a backup. We've got a big pile of handouts here that will actually hopefully explain in plain English what's going on, why this 3 air change per hour standard was such a challenge, especially not just in North Texas, but in all of Climate Zone 3. So those of you that live in Tyler, Lubbock, Amarillo, it's in Climate Zone 4, places like that, have all had to deal with this in some way, shape, or form. So right up there by Jerry, don't worry, he won't bite, but there are some of the handouts here. That'll explain everything that we're about to talk about and everything that would have otherwise been up there on the screen. So be sure to grab those. Thanks, Jerry, for bringing those around. So what I'm going to do, because we only have about 45 minutes and we have a really distinguished panel with a lot of smart guys that could probably in of themselves talk about this for 45 minutes each, but I know you don't want to stick around here for that long, is I'm going to give you a brief history of why we're having this talk and why there have been a lot of other talks and a lot of other meetings to kind of solve this problem over the last, I would say, 18 months or so. And then I'm going to hand it over and ask them a couple questions pertaining to it too. So why this is an issue is most of you know that the state of Texas adopted the 2015 Energy Code as a result of the last legislative session, as in the 2015 legislative session, not the one that is just concluded or we're in the middle of a special session now. So implementation date for that was September of last year, September of 2016. Awesome, we're getting our AV here. Lost my slides, so we'll see how much I remember while he's setting that up. Implementation was September of 2016, and in that there were a few different paths and a few different ways that you could do it, but all of which required as a mandatory requirement the 3 air changes per hour standard for Climate Zones 3 and Climate Zone 4. What that means, and these guys could explain it more scientifically than I can, but that's a pretty damn tight house. That's going to require a lot of air sealing, a lot of attention to detail, or for some of the folks that are in the foam insulation business, that's another solution. A lot of different products that are out there, thank you, that could really set us up and make this happen. The extra challenge that we had in the DFW area is that we're in a place called a non-attainment area. That means that we have non-scientific term for that is we have crappy air quality, and the EPA says that we have crappy air quality, so because of that, we cannot have standards per state statute for our energy code. We cannot make local amendments that make it any less stringent than what the state standard is. So we're kind of hamstrung by that. We have another one, since we're doing a bunch of alphabet soup here, called the Energy Systems Laboratory. They're at Texas A&M down in College Station, and what ESL does is they're the ones that more or less help us determine what stringency is. What kind of trade-offs can we do? What things kind of stay above that stringency line and stay in the confines of the statute. So again, kind of a quick overview of the context that we have here in terms of, just different ways to approach this in North Texas. So there are different paths. Actually stole this from the Fox Energy guys, some of which now have a 4 air changes per hour option on there. Again, like I said, these are mandatory requirements. So before we talk about the trade-offs and before we talk about some of the flexibility that we've been able to attain in North Texas, and believe me, this has saved a lot of our builders a ton of money and a ton of headache, especially the multifamily builders that hopefully some of you are out there. But this is my first question for the panel. Before the trade-offs, as we're approaching the implementation of the new codes, what impact did the 3 air changes per hour standard have on your job or business? So in other words, why, and I'll start with you, James, why is this such a big deal for you? What were some of the things that, I know this is a softball, what were some of the things that you were grappling with a lot of your clients?
And we're talking before the trade-off, correct?
Before the trade-off.
Okay, so with our clientele, the market was really split in half between builders that were pretty close to that threshold already and builders that were nowhere near it. And so for the guys that were nowhere near it, it really did present some true challenges as far as trying to find that magic bullet of what's going to get them across that threshold and trying to manage that on a continuous basis, because you can have the best air sealing package in the world ordered on your home, but it's only as good as the trades that are out there installing that air sealing package. And we know just as well as you guys know that build homes, you don't have the same install crews on each and every home that you build. You're lucky to get the same install crew on 2 homes in a row in this environment, in this labor environment. So with the labor shortage that we were experiencing at the time and the training of trying to get builders to inch closer to this air sealing threshold, that was a huge mountain to climb for a lot of large and small builders out in the marketplace. And so that was priority number 1 for us, was to come up with the plan of attack of the formula that we know that works. And then after we come up with that formula is a constant implementation of training and site visits and more training and more site visits to try to get the consistency down to a T.
Montez, I know you're all over the country, certainly understand what's going on in the Texas market, but from your point of view, how, with this, especially in Texas or maybe in particular North Texas, what was this looking like as 3 air changes per hour was looming in this market from your point of view?
Okay, I'm a design engineer, so what I also do is design air conditioning. And what I've seen, it is a big learning curve for the HVAC contractor and the installers, because I've seen it where the house actually got too tight. And then inside the house became more toxic because the ventilation system, the air conditioning wasn't coming on and bringing fresh air into the house. It's kind of like your car. If you have your little vent closed on your car and you just breathe in everybody, you got 10 people in the car and you don't got the fresh air come in, that air gets a little different. So I've seen it get too tight where the EPA had actually come in and show, okay, you got to do the ventilation right. The ventilation was, it fell off. Nobody even knew that the ventilation wasn't working because all the toxins from the carpets and the woods and all the other kind of stuff was still there. So what I'm finding out, it is a learning curve, because if you make your house too tight, you got to make up that fresh air someplace else. And I've also seen it the other way, where one time we replaced air conditioning. The person had a swamp cooler on their house. And this is just a little fun story real quick. I know I'm going to get it in real quick. Yep. And we replaced it with refrigerated air. They call it refrigerated air. But they called and complained. The next 2 weeks, they called and complained and said, this air conditioning is not working. Well, they thought it was still operating like a swamp cooler, and they left all their windows and doors open for ventilation. And, of course, their air conditioning wasn't working anymore. So that's the other side.
Well, and before we go over to Ed here, we always say at all the classes that we do at the Dallas Builders Association, we try to drill it into everybody, is that build it tight, ventilate it right. You can't have one without the other. You can definitely build a home that's too tight if you don't have the proper ventilation. Certainly a way to make people uncomfortable, maybe cause some other issues with off-gassing and things like that. To me, with kind of a legal background, as we were talking about this at some of our code meetings, that and what Montez was talking about was kind of the other shoe that no one was talking about dropping here is that, okay, it's great that the codes are talking about the envelope tightness, and the mechanical contractors and everybody to understand that the tighter you get, the heightened scrutiny you're going to have when it comes to making sure that you get your ventilation spot on, because then it becomes an occupant and a homeowner safety concern. So the code wasn't really, and a lot of these folks weren't quite ready for that. So it took people that were pretty progressive thinkers to help educate the rest of the industry, and that's been a big popular class at the Dallas Builders Association, both on the building tightness, but even more in particular the ventilation side. So another key player is we were trying to get some of the trade-offs implemented around here is, and he's been a good friend of mine for many years, both as building official at the City of Arlington, now assistant building official at the City of Dallas, is Ed Dryden. And Ed helps us keep it real because he knows the codes inside and out. He'll tell you kind of the if this then that on the codes, but kind of looking at the 3 air changes per hour and approaching this from the other side of the counter as a building official. What was your perspective as we took on this challenge, Ed?
Well, really, our concern was really hearing your concerns, and our job is relatively easy compared to what the builders had. I mean, our objective is to get the proper documentation, get the permit issued, and then get the proper documentation and get the house finalized. And so some of the, I guess, more difficult discussions that we were having is, what are we going to do if at the end of the project the house doesn't pass? You know, because the way the code is, it shall be, and if it's not, then what are we going to do? And as everyone knows, at the end of the project, it's kind of difficult to go back and find out where's the error going. So I applaud the industry because it looks like the industry got in front of this and has done enough education and really has prepared the builders. And what we've actually done over at the Council of Governments has been interesting, and at times it's been fun. And I think we've come up with some pretty good solutions that help, and I think we still got some more work to do.
Yeah, I agree, and I did not want to take that call from one of our members that said, hey, I've got a red tag here, don't have my home tight enough, because those of you that build or have any part in the industry, as Ed said, that's pretty tough to get, and you know there's no amount of foam in a can sometimes that can fix that problem when you get to that point. So thus the need to be proactive and see what other, you know, in terms of what our suppliers have to offer, what other solutions are out there, and that's something that Sam can talk about a little bit briefly from Morrison's point of view. So Sam, go for it.
Yeah, what we found, you know, this is not unique. They're doing this in Minnesota also, but everybody knows what this is. It's a bathroom fan.
Right into the mic. So
It's a bathroom fan. This one happens to be a trade wind fan. It's one of the fans that we sell, and it's an 820 fan, and it's capable of running continuously at 880 CFM, cubic foot per minute, at 1.4 zones. It's Energy Star, and you can't even hear it run. So it's so quiet, it's just unbelievable. And the way to calculate this cubic foot per hour is 80 CFM times 60 minutes to get cubic feet per hour. So you got cubic feet per minute times 60 minutes, and it gives you the cubic foot per hour, which in this case would be 4,800 cubic foot per hour. So naturally you figure out how big the house is, and then you can find out how many of these fans you need. And the 820 delivers, like I said, 4,800 cubic foot per hour. Then calculate the volume of the area, and you come up with these, how many fans you're gonna need. You probably have 2 in a bathroom. You gotta make sure that it is this type of fan, and your air will change 3 times a day.
So there are a lot of solutions out there that require the industry to be pretty nimble, but I knew that, you know, keep in mind you've got folks that are, you know, coming to the Sunbelt Builder Show and come to our classes, and they get it and they see this stuff coming. What I was more worried about, seeing them struggle through this issue, I was more worried about the ones that I don't hear from. They may or may not be a member of the Builders Association. They're probably not in tune with what's going on. They probably don't nerd out with us on a Wednesday afternoon talking energy codes. So, but nonetheless, the energy code is the least efficient home you can legally build, even though that home is getting a heck of a lot more efficient than it used to be. So those were going to be the ones who, you know, unknowingly kind of went into this and had some challenges. But even the ones that were knowingly approaching this and trying to figure out, hey, how can we do this in a market where affordability is becoming more and more of a concern, you know, both in North Texas and around the state and around the country, as a matter of fact, with the labor shortage and land prices and everything else. I mean, just a few $100 here and there are making a lot of difference between how many folks you can offer your products out to. So where's that balance at? How can we make sure that we get the energy efficiency that the code intended, but still have some flexibility so we're not doing it in a way that's unduly adding costs? So that's where the trade-offs came in. And a lot of this is explained out in your handouts, and I'm going to have each of them kind of give their perspective on how the trade-offs have helped, and maybe even some individual builder examples on where the trade-offs have helped. But more or less, to sum up what those are, is 4 air changes per hour, you know, 3 air changes per hour I said was a pretty darn tight house or something like that. 4 air changes per hour, at least up here, people can get there. And really when it comes to how much energy usage does that add, it's not a whole lot. So it's easy actually to find some things that you can get that energy savings back. So for single family homes, you've got a table in there that kind of has prescriptive trade-offs in there. That's just kind of a laundry list of things. You either do it or you don't. Performance trade-off is something that a lot more builders seem to be interested in because it's a lot more flexible. So what we were doing is we took the approach with the COG that said, hey, model a home, pretend it has 3 air changes per hour, it's going to use X in terms of energy every year. Okay, do the same thing, model it at 4 air changes per hour, a little less tight, you're going to have Y energy efficiency. So that number is going to be, Y is going to be a little bit higher than X. You're going to have a little bit more to overcome with 4 air changes per hour, but luckily some of the software, you can throw in a few things and make up that difference. So it's a more flexible approach there. Multifamily was a lot tougher though. Multifamily, how many of y'all deal with multifamily construction in some way, shape, or form? That was a bigger challenge. As you all know, you know, I try to tell people, think of a dryer duct. That dryer duct is the same size in an 800 square foot apartment as it is in a 4,500 square foot home. It's still a penetration in the wall. It's still a point where some of that air is getting leaked out. However, the size of that compared to the rest of the building envelope is much more significant on an 800 square foot apartment. In other words, smaller homes, smaller units get penalized for this stuff. So we're thinking there aren't a whole lot, and the Fox guys were telling us there aren't a whole lot of multifamily projects that are going to work at 3 air changes per hour. The units just weren't getting there. So we're talking, okay, what's the spirit and intent to the code? It's talking about air leakage to the outside, not necessarily air leakage from unit to unit, where in this market at least there's a 96% chance that somebody lives there because that's our occupancy rate, and it's going to be occupied and it's going to be conditioned. So we had the Energy Systems Lab, helped with Fox and some of these other guys, run some models and say, okay, how much of these units are actually leaking to the outside, and what's our real number in terms of the air leakage we're looking for? And what they came up with is 5.3 air changes per hour for interior and 5 air changes per hour for corner were the equivalent to what you would see in your traditional 4-wall single family. So much more attainable standard for those folks. The other thing that the code required or talked about was every unit had to be tested. And these guys that work in multifamily will tell you that, you know, you've got units that you're trying to finish out, and, you know, for one, you can't surround a unit and run like 8 different blower door tests at the same time to figure out what that unit in the middle does. For 2, testing every single unit where the same contractors working on it and the same install techniques are happening is a little bit of overkill. So can we have some kind of random drug testing go on here? So they said 15%, and it's up to the building official and the building department on how to implement that. But 15% was good enough. A lot of that model came from Austin and San Antonio, I believe. So that leads me to my next question and gets me to stop droning on. How's your job or business coping with the new energy code, and especially the trade-offs I just described? How has that helped, and what's been the real-world application in terms of finding some relief among the folks that you work with? And we'll start with James once again.
Well, as far as the new energy codes affecting our business, obviously it's created more demand in services like what we provide as an independent third-party energy services company, which is a good thing. But on the flip side, it's kind of a double-edged sword, is that, with those really stringent standards comes a lot of due diligence on the front end in preparing a home for construction and being able to have a contingency plan if it doesn't perform as intended on the back end. So there's kind of some good and some bad with it. And that's what we were facing before the trade-offs came up. Since the trade-offs came into play, that was a godsend. That really was, because we primarily deal with production builders in a large volume environment, but we also have a very robust portfolio of custom builders as well. And so that trade-off, the prescriptive trade-off specifically, that was a godsend for a lot of our production volume builders, because when you're in that environment, let's say you have 10 plans that's your go-to plans. Those are your top 10 most popular plans. You have to do the modeling on the front end that is going to give you a batting average of 1,000 to make sure that all 10 of those plans, at worst case scenario, are going to pass this energy code no matter what challenges are faced down the road. So that's the front end portion of what we have to do. And so this trade-off, the prescriptive trade-off, provided very tangible, concrete options that a builder can utilize and have in their toolkit that are marketable as well. Better windows, a little bit better attic insulation, R3 sheathing. Those are all tangible assets to the home that they can actually sell to the home buyer. And to be able to utilize those as a trade-off to comply with this energy code in case it didn't get to 3, that was a really good insurance policy to have in place, and to make sure that everything was trued up on the back end. And so that was, like I said, that was a godsend. And as the market stands right now, the market's split in half amongst builders that we deal with, at least. Half of the market is getting to 3 ACH without any problems. They were pretty close to that before the new codes hit. The other half of the market, they needed that trade-off, and they take full advantage of that trade-off, because like Phil said, it's really not a huge deal to get to 4 air changes per hour, but getting below 3, that's a whole different monster. There's only so much water you can squeeze out of that rock. So for our business and for our clients' businesses, that provided a huge amount of relief that also gave them some options that were marketable and affordable at the time. So that was a huge deal.
Yeah, and I appreciated some of the real-world feedback as far as the challenges that they were facing. We also jokingly call the energy code that got passed by the legislature the Home Energy Rater Employment Act of 2015, because the test each requirements on there made a pretty good insurance policy for you guys, but you've been working really hard to help us get these trade-offs, so that's why I get to pick on you a little bit. But Montez, kind of the national perspective, but also the local one, is you've seen jurisdictions roll up to the 2015 challenges with this, and why are trade-offs up to 4 air changes per hour important for somebody on your end of the business?
Yep. I would like to echo your sentiments exactly. Being on the front end of everything, we can design it to whatever the homeowner or the builder needs. We do a lot of custom homes also. And if we do a 10,000 square foot home and we're doing spot ventilation and that exhaust fan is way over there, it's not ventilating the other side of the house. Also, we can address homeowners' needs. If they have a health issue and we know they have bad outdoor conditions, you can run the fresh air through the filter before it comes into the house, but make the house extra tight. If you're in a great part of the nation, we have a lot of fresh air, you make the house a little bit looser and let the house breathe a little bit more. So this has offered a lot of opportunity for our business because we do it and handle it for the builder or the owner up front. So it's really helped.
Yeah, and I think it also, like you were saying before, the ventilation issues, we're not quite walking the high wire act that we were before. Maybe if we are, we've got a safety net under there. So again, I'm really concerned about the, you know, we've dealt with mold issues in the past, and we've dealt with sick house stuff in the past, and you know, too far too fast without the industry figuring out best practices can create those concerns too. So I think this helps a little bit, but again, it doesn't sacrifice energy efficiency. Ed, from your point of view, you know, we've done a lot with the COG, and we've done a lot with the Energy Systems Lab to kind of create the paper trail that allows you as a building official to say, as most cities are able to do, they give you a little bit of latitude in terms of alternative compliance paths, but in order for you to be comfortable implementing one of those, you've got to have the paperwork, and you've got to have the way to explain it, and the certainty and the fairness to interpret it. So how does this look from your point of view, and perhaps the point of view from your colleagues in the area?
Well, I'll speak primarily for the city of Dallas, but actually the implementation of the code has been pretty easy because we are a third-party city, meaning that we register third-party energy providers, and those are the guys that do the real work. So we're actually looking for the documentation from the third-party providers on the front end and on the back end. And if we've got the documentation, then we're happy campers. And so it really hasn't been that much of an impact. I know across the Metroplex, the business model of cities vary. Some do their own plan reviews, some do their own inspections, and I do hear that some cities aren't real eager to accept some of the recommendations that come out of the Council of Governments. I've tried to talk with a couple of those just to see if we can tell them and educate them that we're not giving anything up if we do accept any of these trade-offs. But as it comes out of the Council of Governments, unfortunately, it's not a mandate. It is a recommendation, and the local building officials can choose to do what they feel like is best for their city.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Ed. One of the really good things that we have in North Texas is in our particular Dallas Builders Association service area, we have 7 counties and 92 cities, so potentially 92 different ways of interpreting and implementing the 2015 codes, not just energy and everything else, but Ed heads up the Energy and Green Committee on our Regional Codes Council that meets through our Council of Governments, and most of the major cities are represented there, so we get everybody to the table, we have the conversation once, and cost saver for a lot of folks. You get the continuity from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Most of the building officials there can understand the industry's concern and comments, and then going through this process, be okay with implementing some of these, even though they're recommendations, they end up more often than not becoming an easy implement in these cities. So, Sam, from your point of view, how has the new energy code kind of changed the conversation that your clients and your customers are having with Morrison, and how have your folks been able to respond to those needs and help them out?
Well, obviously, you know, it's a code, so you got to change the air. Good news is, excuse me, is that when you change the air over, you got fresh air almost all the time, so you're breathing better, you know, it's better for your health. I mean, there's some advantages to it. And the expense is not that much more because you say you got 3 bathrooms, you're going to have 3 of these fans. So you can put these fans anywhere and you can't hear them run. That is the good news. And what it's done for our business, and obviously we're selling more fans, but it is a good way to change the air, and when you have clean, fresh air, it makes your quality of life better.
Appreciate that, and we deliberately, and almost hit it right on the nose, left some time because I wanted to get an introduction, an idea, and a perspective to you from different sectors and segments of the industry in terms of why this is a problem, what sort of solutions we've implemented. You've got my handouts that try to explain what can be a pretty complicated subject and difficult to talk about in just 45 minutes and a few articles, and you can see the tables for themselves. There's my contact information if you need more info or something to follow up from me, but I also wanted to leave the last 15 minutes or so for you and your questions. If you have those for me or anybody else on the panel, or just want to get a variety of thoughts on is this working, what other questions you have from the experts up here. So raise your hand and we'll take them if you got them. Come on, I know some of you are very inquisitive, but I'm glad that we've sedated you enough to be able to talk about that. So going once, going twice on any questions back here? Awesome. Well, I have no qualms about finishing up a little bit early. I know this has been relevant for our members. I hope it's been relevant for you. This has been a really good exercise in what the local association and state associations advocacy can do, working with a lot of stakeholders, even environmental groups, on trying to find a solution that works for everybody and trying to solve a problem before it really showed up on your job site and kept you from doing the work that you do, especially in the multifamily context where these things were just not going to happen if we kept the 3 air changes per hour in there. So appreciate your time today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Sunbelt Builders Show, and we appreciate you being at our seminar. Thank you.